In this video, we're going to explore how to edit fonts that you create inside of Floriani Lettering Master. It's very easy to do, and I want to run through a few of the key things with you. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new font. We'll just do this really quick. There's another video that shows how to create a font, but since we're going to be editing one, let's go ahead and create another one really quick. So I'm just in the wizard for creating a new font, and I'm just going to go with this Arial font here. I'm going to choose next, and now I'm going to select the characters that I'm going to work with. So I'm just going to select a few here. I'm not going to do a lot because this is just video to kind of show how to edit them. So I'm going to make sure all these options are checked, and I'm going to hit finish. So the software is now going to go and create the font, and from here we'll take a look at how to edit the characters and what all we can do here. So we have this font, it's created, it's now ready for saving if I want to create it as a font. But let's look at the different things that we can do to edit. So the first thing is we have all the characters up on the screen. One of the things that we can do is we have this edit font kernings, and we have import true type font kernings. So we're working with a true type font, so I'm going to click on this import true type font kerning. And what kerning is like the space between letters. Alright, so like as you create a font, it's gonna, you know, allow one letter to be closer to the other or further apart. Kerning is just a simple thing. It's really easy in the software to do the modifications yourself, so it's I don't do it very often, but the option is here. So the first thing you have to do is make sure you select the same font that you used when you brought in and created the font. So I have Arial, that's the one that I chose, so you'll want to make sure you remember what the font name is. And we'll hit OK. And that imports all of the kerning for the different letters. Okay, so now it's going to take it from that true type font, so I'm going to automatically apply them to the letters. So it's very easy to do, it's very simple, doesn't take any time. So now let's explore what else we can do. So if I select one of the letters, I can right click on it, and I can choose to edit the character, and if I choose to edit, it's going to open up the letter in a different window that gives me the options for editing. I'll come back to this in a second. I'm going to go back to the font editor here. I'm going to right click, and I can delete the character. I can change the key. So let's say that there was a different character in here, and it was assigned to a specific key, but you wanted to make it assigned to a different key. You can change the key. So if you click this, right now this 0 is assigned to key 0, so that makes sense. But if I wanted to change it, I could. So I hit OK here. And I'm just going to say no, I'm not going to override it. Now I'm going to right click again, and I can set a reference character. Okay, so selecting a reference character, I don't know if you notice that on the screen, but when I did that, everything else moved. So basically what it means is you're stating that this character you want to be the reference character for everything else. So what it did is when I chose that, it moved all of these letters to the right, the numbers and letters. And you can see that there's these little lines here, and it kind of like put them to the edge. So it's an option that you have. You can see that when I set that as a reference character, everything moved. So it just adjusts all the letters according to the one that you select. Now we'll right click again, and you can see that those are your basic options for just a right click editing. Now let's take a look at that 0 that we opened up in the font editing section here. I can put it on 3D view so you can see it. One of the things I want to point out is in the sequence view over here, you have a artwork piece, because we chose, when we built the font, we chose that we wanted the outlines, that we wanted the embroidery, and that we wanted the extents box. So this is the artwork, the outline. This second object is the satin path, or the embroidery letter. And the third one is this artwork box. That is your extents box. So those are the three items. The one thing I will state, if you're, you create the font and you're doing all of, you included all of these, which I recommend, you always want to make sure your satin path is in the same position. So you don't want to move these around. You don't want to make this outline move down and make the satin path first. Keep it in the same order. So again, if I turn the 3D view on, you can see what the stitches look like. So what are some of the things I can do? Well, I can grab, I can resize it a little bit if I want. If I wanted to take this down or bring this one up a little bit, I can do that. I will say this, I recommend that if you're going to resize it, I'm going to undo a couple times. One of the things you'll want to do is I just recommend it, select both the artwork by left clicking on it, holding down shift, and then clicking on the satin path, so that when you're resizing it, you're resizing them together so that they stay the same size. You don't have to do it, but I recommend it. So I'm going to select this satin path again, and I'm going to come over here to my shape edit tool. And when I click on the shape edit tool, I get three things. I get start and end points. So this is where the letter starts, this is where it ends. I get angle lines, and then I get the outlines with these points, or what we call nodes. So these are the three different areas that you can adjust. So if you needed to change the start point and the end point, you can do that very easily just by moving them, clicking and moving. And then we have the angle lines, the same thing. It's really easy to adjust them, where you can just click on one of them and one of the sides and just drag it so that you can get it into the exact shape that you want. And then if you want to adjust any of the outlines, you can do that too by clicking on one of the nodes or the points. They're the blue dots that you see around this object, and you'll see that you get these handlebars. And if I click and drag, notice that it's clicking and dragging both sides. This is because it's using a smooth point. And you can right click on the point at any time and you get different options. Let me come up to this one because it was kind of falling off the screen there. So we have edit, which you can choose to edit just one of the options. So if I wanted to just focus on the outlines and not the entry, the exit point, or the angle lines, I can click on just outlines and it's going to remove those other objects. So it makes it easier to edit if I want. So I can come back here and choose all, and it'll bring all of that back. Right click again. I can add a point. So let's say that something wasn't quite the way you want it to look and you needed an extra point in there so that you could modify a little bit. You can add a point, or if you wanted to delete a point, you could do that as well. You also have the option for a line, cusp, smooth, or symmetrical node. So what that does is if I click on the line, watch what happens to this area right here. Now all of a sudden it does a straight line from this node to the next node. So if I hit undo, watch how this line will come back and follow that shape. So then I can choose cusp, and what cusp does is it will, whenever you move one of the handlebars on one side, it'll keep the other side exactly the same. It won't move it at the same time. So If I click and drag, notice that this handlebar didn't change at all, so this shape stayed the same, but it will change on this side. Now if I go over to the other side, same thing will happen. It will affect this side of the node but not that. So it's handy at times where you really need to control a shape. Let me right click, and now we'll choose smooth, and what smooth does is it tries to smooth out the node. So like the line going into the point and the line going out of the point, it makes it smooth so you don't see a notch in it. What I'm going to point out before I show you the next thing is notice how this handlebar is shorter than this one, because you can click and drag when you're using smooth, and you can make one handlebar longer than the other. But if I right click and I go to symmetrical, notice how now they're the exact same size, and if I move one, the other one moves. So that's the difference between smooth and symmetrical, is that symmetrical, when you're working with these handlebars, if you move one, it moves the other the same amount in the opposite direction. Okay, so smooth will let you kind of change the distance of one handlebar from the other and still keep it a smooth node, but symmetrical does them both at the same time. So those are the different ways that you can adjust the points. I did talk about adding or deleting. So what I can do is, if I need to add a point somewhere so I can have more control, you just go to anywhere on that line, you right click and choose add point, and now all of a sudden a point is there, and it's going to put a smooth point in. So now I could adjust this if I wanted to, or let's say that I don't need the point, that there's just too many of them. I can right click and hit delete, and so I'm gonna have to come in here and fix that shape a little bit, but you can delete a point. So let's right click again. The other option you have is add inclinations, and this is like your angle lines. Okay, so you can add more or you can delete them. First I'll show you how to add, because I notice that there's an angle line right here, but there's not another one till right here. A lot of times I like to have them in the, like right here, like in almost like a four corners type thing. So let me go to add, and all you do to add, notice that on my cursor there's a little black dot below to the right. That means that I have that tool selected. So if I just left click and drag to the other side, and while I'm still holding it, you can see I can go up or down, but I want to get it right here, and then I just release the mouse. Now notice I'm still in this tool. It's still connected. So I could come in here if I wanted to add one right there. I could add one right here. I could add one right here. And then when I right mouse click, it's going to modify according to those new angle lines that I just put in. Because sometimes you can find some designs that just have an odd shape to them. So the stitches are going in an odd direction, and you can adjust these very easily inside the software to get it to kind of follow the direction you want it to, and that looks much better. Okay, so next I'll right click, and you have the ability to delete them, but in order to delete one, you got to kind of select one. So I'm clicking on this one. I have to have my mouse on that angle line here. I'll right click and I can choose to delete it, and it will take it away. And then I can split the line, which I don't recommend doing in when working with fonts, but what it'll do is it'll break it apart. It'll make it so that the lines are no longer connected at the point. It's kind of hard with a satin stitch, so you can see that when I click on a point, I don't have that option anymore. A split line, you can add a split line to a letter, but I'll show you that with a different letter. So those are the different things that you can do using the shape edit tool, and this helps you to make the modifications that you might need to a shape, to the angle lines, to a start point, an end point. This is just how you will modify the shape of the letter whenever needed. So if I come back to my selection tool, if I right mouse click, you can see I can cut, copy, paste, break it apart, preserve as stitches. The other thing that I have the ability to do is adjust the size, rotate it, things like that. So those are your basic editing features. So now once you get the letter where you want it, all you have to do to get back is just to close it. Hit close and say that yes, I want to save it. And now it's updated that letter so that it's got the latest edited version. So I wanted to show you split lines really quick. So I'm going to grab this letter A. I'm going to right mouse click and go to edit character. And when you bring it up, you can see that I'm going to need to do a little bit of adjusting here. Let me select it. Let me take it off 3D. I always edit out of 3D view so that I can see the lines really well. So you can see that there's a few things going on with this design that I need to kind of give some attention to, like right here in this area. And I want to change the way it handles this corner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to edit and edit outlines, because I want to hide the angle lines and the start and end point so that I can see exactly what I want to grab here. So you can see in this shape there's just this little extra piece here, and that I don't want in the design, right? So I'm going to select this point here, right mouse click and hit delete point, and I'm going to do the same thing to this one. So now what I'm basically doing, and I'm going to bring it in a little bit, I'm just cleaning it up. So I'm going to bring this one back to where it was, and now when I right click, watch what happens to the stitches in this area. They'll go away, and now it's a much cleaner letter. Sometimes you're going to want to or need to do this with the letters. It all kind of is based off of how clean and how nice the true type font is to begin with before it's converted. So it's not something that you know for sure what's going to happen until you actually convert it to stitches, and that's why it's always a good idea to take a look at the letters before you save as a font. So now I'm going to zoom into this area right here, because I a lot of times like to have the stitches going this direction all the way through instead of wrapping around. So I'm going to, with the shape edit tool, I'm going to right mouse click, and I'm again going to go to the outlines so that I can hide the other stuff. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the line, and I'm going to choose this add a split line. Okay, so I'm going to click that. Now you can see everything kind of goes away, but notice that I have a little orange dot next to my cursor. The split lines are orange in color. And this is a virtual split, so it's not going to actually cut the artwork. It's just going to virtually split in that area like it has been broken apart. Okay, so now I'm going to click here, and I'm going to drag over to the other side. I'm going to try to make it as straight as I can. So I'm just going to go about right here. Make sure I have this up into that corner, so I'm just dragging it up a little bit, and then we'll just adjust this a little bit here. When I right mouse click, watch what happens to the way the stitches go in this letter. Okay, so you can see when I put it in 3D view that now it's very different. Okay, so there's a few things that I will adjust from this point. But you can see that it actually treats it like you've split the artwork, like this being a separate object from this one. But there's a few things that we have going on here. First, this one's coming down, this angle line. So I'm going to drag it down, and I'm going to make it in line with this one here. Next, we have this angle line going up and down. So you can see that there's a little black dot next to my cursor. That means that I have the angle line or the inclination line selected. So now I'm going to drag it, and see that I'm dragging it up here to the top, and I'm going to drag this side back over, and at the same time I'm going to drag this one down So basically what I'm doing here is I'm making it so that when I right mouse click, all these stitches that are going this direction are now going to be going this direction and over to here, and this side it's going to be coming in and going the same direction as this one will be. So when I right mouse click, look what happens. So now the stitches are all going in the same direction, and this one comes down. This is what you call a capped corner. And it's just a term for how this corner is handled. So if I hit 3D view, now look at how those stitches are. It's very flat. Instead of trying to add all these stitches as it goes around like it was originally doing, now all the stitches are going up and coming back down, and it's very smooth. And this is just a different way to handle the letters. So that is the add split line feature. It allows you to virtually split an area to get the stitches to be able to go in the direction you want. So that is the add split line. Now we'll just take a look at the rotating it. If you needed to rotate a letter a little bit, you can just you can select it, like going in the sequence view here, and you can come up here to this little blue dot and you can angle it any way that you want to, right? So if it just needed to be adjusted a little bit, I can move it to where I needed it to be, remove the left click, and it puts it into position. You do have the ability to adjust things like color, but when you're saving a font, it isn't really going to matter. It's going to bring it into the software at a default color. So there is another option that's available for inside the software, like if you get a letter that isn't coming out just right, or you need to go back to where you were with a letter, like we have this one here, but let's say that I really want to get it back to the original. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to move this one out of the way, and I'm going to select this artwork piece. So we have artwork here, and this is what it created the font from. So when I have this artwork selected, there's an icon up here that says Create Embroidery Segment, and this is a very handy tool if you ever need to go back to adding or creating a letter because you've kind of messed one up too much. We can come back here, click this button, and notice that this looks identical to what it was before. Now the one thing you need to keep in mind is when I created this and converted it to stitches, it dropped it down here as the last object. I need to move this back up by just left clicking on it and dragging it up, and when it gets to the top here, I'm going to release the mouse because it's going to throw it underneath whatever's selected. So now it is right there. So I could take this one and I could cut it out or delete it. So now I'm back to the original if I needed to go there. And then if I go to save, it'll save over the top of it. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's right click. Do I want to save changes? I'll say yes. And now it's been updated. So those are your different options for editing fonts that you've created inside the software. I hope that this helps. There's a lot of things that were covered. You might have to watch this video a few times, but if you ever get stuck where you need to edit a letter or a character, you can do that using you can watch this video again and get some ideas for doing that. Now another thing that I want to point out, I'm going to close this and I'm not going to save it, but instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to this create font section and I'm going to choose to open a font. So let's say that we created that font and we were getting ready to use it in a design, but we noticed that one of the letters were off. You can always come back to a font, edit it, and save it again. So there's a number of fonts that I have here that I have created, and I can choose any of them and hit open, and it's going to open that entire font into the system. And now I could say, hey, I didn't like what it was doing with this letter or this number 0. I could right click and edit it. I could make the changes that I want to, close out of that, and hit this save button. And what that's going to do is it's going to save those changes for that font. So now when you go back to use that letter again, it's going to be the way that you adjusted it. I've done this a number of times in creating fonts where I just noticed there's something I didn't like about a letter or a number, and I'll just open it back up and I will make the adjustment and then just save it, and then I'll go back in and use it again. So once you've created a font like this one, this AAABBB, I give them weird names because I want them to show up at the top of the font list. But if I want to go and create a lettering design, I can go back into the I can go back into the main section of the software, and I can grab the text tool. I can click on the screen that will load text on, and all I have to do is just find that font that I want to use, like this AAABBB, and I can use that and apply, and it's going to bring that font in. So you can see here what I was talking about with the kerning. The reason why I don't really worry about kerning when I'm creating a font is because it's really easy to adjust the kerning. And by kerning, it means moving something left or right. So I can easily adjust it and get it exactly how I want. And so that's why I don't really do it when I'm creating the font, because a lot of times you'll need to adjust it anyways. So just a little tidbit there. But that is how you edit letters or fonts that you create in the software. Hope this video was helpful and that you can use it for creating all the lettering designs that you do.